Good afternoon, everyone. And how is everyone on this soggy Thursday? Just remember, we don't have to shovel. I am Marcy Fessler, President of the First Friday Club Board. In the name of our officers, board members, and committees, welcome to the March program of our 20th anniversary season. As always, I am truly grateful beyond words for everyone in this room and beyond who continues to support our First Friday Club. You and your parishes make it possible for us to continue to plan into a third decade of speakers and luncheons. It's very exciting for us. And it is that time of year again where I make my annual ask for new board members. We are a working board full of subcommittees that include fundraising, marketing, and hospitality. We meet quarterly, depending on the subcommittee. There may be some additional meetings through the year. I ask, please, consider sharing your time and talent as a board member to help us keep First Friday Club stable in the years to come. If you have any questions, please ask one of the board members here. And this is where all the board members give me the groan, because I'm going to ask them all to stand to be acknowledged as board members who have worked very hard to continue. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5, there's another one, 6, me, 7. I can't do my job as president without all of them. Without their help, without their support, and without their kindness. So please, spend some time discerning. We would love to add to our numbers. As a few reminders, please check your cell phone or your smartwatch. Make sure it is silenced. Father Jerek has informed me he will not dance to your ringtone. If you need religious education hours, there was a form at the sign-in table at the welcome table. Be sure to like us on Facebook for updates and any changes. And if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? Do it. Go onto YouTube, look up First Friday Club of Youngstown, and click subscribe, because then you'll find out when all our updates are on there of our videos. Next month, this is a coup of almost epic proportions. We gather on April 9th to hear the National President of Catholic Charities. Yes, the National President of Catholic Charities USA is coming, Mrs. Carrie Ailes Robinson, and she is going to present People of Hope, Reflections on the Power of Service and Encounter. Okay, yeah, I'm a little excited, but you know I am. Please, reservations are due 1 week prior to the luncheon. Please join me thanking Kathy Rothman and Elaine Winner for sponsoring Father Jerek today. Thank you, ladies. Father Jerek, I forgot to ask, are you entertaining questions at the end of your presentation? That's a yes. Now please, let's bow our heads, remembering our presenter, all who have gathered in this room, and those who have been unable to join us today, and all the prayers that we hold in our hearts. In a spirit of praise and thanks, God, our Creator, you sustain our lives through the gift of your Spirit and the following of Jesus. Stir in us the desire to learn, to love, to serve more generously, to act on behalf of justice and truth. We ask these blessings in your holy name. Amen. I invite Kathy Rothman to introduce Father Jerek.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us. We hope that you enjoyed your lunch. It's a pleasure to introduce our first Friday speaker, Father Jerek. Father is a renowned priest in the Youngstown Diocese. He was previously a Southside boy over at St. Matthias for so many years, but now he's settled over at Saint Mary Magdalene Parish, formerly St. Christine's. Did you know that Father grew up on Point View on the south side of Youngstown with 3 brothers and 2 sisters, with his dear mother and his dear father? And now his mom resides across the street at the inn at the Christine Valley, so it's so convenient for Father to visit his mom and be there. Did you know that Father has worn countless hats in this diocese? But he's found time for his passions. Do you know those passions? One is gourmet cooking. He's a gourmet chef. Did you know that Father had a gift for journalism? He also judged speech teams. Do you know that Father is a world traveler, especially to Slovakia? And everything that is Slovak, Father loves. Do you know that he recently went to Hawaii and enjoyed how beautiful the Pacific was? Do you know that Father has a passion for Dorothy Day House, and he has been a friend of our St. Vincent de Paul for countless years and has helped us immensely? Do you know that we're all lucky to be here today to listen to Father talking about wrestling with cultural myths? With happiness in my heart, I'd like to introduce Father John Jerek.
Thank you, Kathy. You need to quit having conversations with my office staff. It's a real honor to be here today. In many cases, I go back with many of you for many years. There's an awful lot of wisdom in this room. There's certainly a huge level of dedication to our church and a real love for that church, in spite sometimes of its weaknesses. So I thank you for welcoming me among you. I'm going to try to move along and respect time as best as I can. This topic, wrestling with our cultural myths, is one that I've wanted to explore for some time. And just like with the adult formation series in my parish, it helps for me to prepare for these because I learn so much. And it's kind of a dangerous thing because with the internet available and so much information accessible to us without having to go to a library these days, I can get kind of lost in online land as I say, oh, now why did they say this and what does this mean and all of that. So this really contributes to my learning and I appreciate it. Many years ago, I was able to spend 5 summers at Boston College at their Institute of Religious Education and Pastoral Ministry. And it was my first time being in Boston, and I loved the city. And one of the first places that a friend of mine took me was to the John F. Kennedy Library Museum. And there was a film that introduced Kennedy and his family and all of that. And I was just moved by this quote by the former president. Okay, so he says to Yale University at their graduation in 1962, "The great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, although that does do damage, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. Too often we hold fast to the cliches of our forebears. We subject all facts to a prefabricated set of interpretations. We enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought." So what the president is saying is that so often we do not examine our assumptions and presuppositions, which lead to a kind of unthinking posture. We need to be asking, as a church, as communities, as a country, Why are we doing what we're doing? Where did this come from? And that can open us up, I think, to really pursuing the truth at all levels. So again, we have to keep in mind that myths can be good if they teach a moral lesson. At the same time, they can be somewhat destructive. Okay, so a myth, usually a traditional story of ostensibly historical events. Ostensibly means seeming historical events. Often myths cover up or conceal the truth that serves to unfold part of the worldview of a people or explain a practice, belief, or natural phenomenon. Okay, second definition, a popular belief or tradition that has grown up around something or someone especially, one embodying the ideals and institutions of a society or segment of society. And thirdly, another definition, an unfounded or false notion. Okay, now, it's interesting because the hold that myths have on us can be all over the place. On Sunday, I was at Road of Shalom Synagogue in Pittsburgh with my 8th grade confirmation class. This is our annual pilgrimage, which includes visiting St. Paul's Catholic Cathedral and then going over to the synagogue, and then, of course, ending our learning time with our meal at the Hofbrauhaus, where none of us drink beer, of course. So during our visit, each time we've had a different rabbi. How many of you remember the Old Testament story of Esther? Does anybody remember that Old Testament story? Okay, it's about a Jewish woman who becomes the queen of Persia. There's plotting against the Jewish people that takes place, and Esther is trying to convince her husband, the king, that her people are not these evil creatures that they're made out to be. Now, the rabbi said, now here's me, I've read the book a couple of times. The rabbi said, you all need to understand that this historically never happened. This is religious myth. The job of religious myth is to teach religious truth. The truth of the story being that God is there for us even when it seems the whole world is against us, and that God is there for us especially when we are a scapegoated people. Okay, so I thought, wow, this is like, I always thought that, they have this holiday called Purim, where they celebrate the story that never really happened, but still, the religious truth of the story prevails. So again, just kind of another example of myth. Oh, I'm going backwards instead of forwards. Okay, now in a myth, certain claims can lead to self-serving even evil agendas. Does anybody know what's going on in this slide? It's a hard one. Okay, on the left is Noah. On the right is his son, Canaan or Ham. Now, I think most of you know that most of Genesis is religious myth. Okay, some of it is historical, but most of it is religious myth. Myths teach us religious truths. So here's what's going on in the story. According to Genesis 12, after the ark subsides from the waters and ends up on land, Noah, of course, offers a sacrifice to God in thanksgiving, and then he plants vines. He plants grapevines. The following harvest, the wine is young and very potent, and he ends up drinking too much, and he's in a tent drunk, and he's naked. So he has 3 sons, Japheth, Shem, and Ham. Japheth and Shem come into the tent, and they're like, Dad, cover up, come on, just, sleep it off. Ham comes in and he chastises his father. He says, look at you. You're drunk. You're making a spectacle of yourself and all that. And so Noah, in his drunkenness, curses him and says that your descendants shall be slaves to the descendants of your brothers. Okay, now the story is meant to teach respect for your father even when he's not doing well. But what happens is some folks, especially in the Dutch Reformed Church, get a hold of this and they say, well, the descendants of Ham and Canaan end up settling in Africa, so God wills that African peoples should be slaves to white and Oriental peoples. It is the biblical justification for the slave trade. Okay, number one, the story is not historically true. Number two, who said that the descendants of these mythical people ended up settling in Africa? Okay, now can you see how that is perpetuated? That is perpetuated in our country, especially in the South, to excuse slavery as being God's will. It's a myth. It leads to destructive behavior. If we don't say, okay, now, wait a minute, if this story is historically true, how could the human race form three races from one father? You know, what's going on in the DNA pool there? We could add our scientific knowledge to today, to then. So again, it's important that we critically think and that we ask questions. Okay, now there are myths that contribute to misogyny, the hatred and distrust of women. So on the left, who do we have? Eve. Eve bit the apple. Who's on the right? Pandora. Okay, in Greek mythology, when the gods wanted to get even with humans for stealing fire from heaven, they create this woman called Pandora, give her a box and say, don't open it. Because, of course, women are the weaker sex, she opens it and unleashes onto the world all these vices, shuts the box in time to preserve hope, which is at the bottom of the box, so that it won't get eaten by all these other vices. Now, Pandora, of course, is a woman. Eve, of course, is a woman. Women introduce evil into the world, according to the myths. Question is, who's writing the myths? Men are. Okay, so I think we have to be very, very careful about, and this has been used to justify sexism since day one. We have to be very careful about that. We have to question our beliefs, especially when they're rooted in myths. Popular American myths. We're going to go into that. Now, I have to tell you this. I love my country very much. I am a patriotic American. I love it especially during these times when its democracy is being tested, when its constitution is being ignored. And so part of love means that we have to be critical. When we love our family members, sometimes we have to be critical, all right? Now, in this, popular American myths, if you can't see it, we've got Jefferson or Washington holding up the Liberty Bell. We've got an angel on top of him that says, for God and country. We've got a cross at the left. We've got the American eagle on the right. And we've got sheaths of arrows and sheaves of wheat. And underneath it says, it is our holy duty to guard against the foreign hordes. Okay? This poster comes out 1885, 1890, when most of our ancestors were coming into the country, because we were the foreign hordes who were going to bring this foreign religion with all of its weirdness to the shores of America. Okay, so that's why we have to examine some of these American myths. One of them, the United States was founded as a Christian nation. Okay, so you see the signers of the Declaration of Independence here. As we look at this, I think we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be Christian? What teachings of Jesus are unique? This goes way beyond the Ten Commandments, okay? So, unique teachings of Jesus, anybody? Love thy neighbor as thyself. Love your enemy. How about that? Revenge and retribution, no way. Revenge, going after your political enemies, is very, very un-American or un-Christian. Okay? What else might be? Forgiveness. Now, that is not the Christianity that some of these people who claim this are peddling. So let's take a look at what's going on there. When the signers of the Declaration of Independence, they were predominantly Christian. Most of them were baptized. But that doesn't necessarily mean that their beliefs stem from Christianity. Matter of fact, deism is the belief in nature's God, and what we could call the prime mover. It is not the God of Jesus Christ. It is not the God of the Jewish people or of the Muslims. Okay, so this is kind of the God who makes the universe, winds it up and sets it in motion, and then sits back and lets us do the rest, as scary as that may sound. Okay, that deism is practiced by the French philosopher Rousseau and the English philosopher John Locke. Okay, and it forms the philosophy behind the Declaration of Independence, okay, which I'm going to call the social contract theory. Some of you study the social contract theory, and what it holds is, for us to live together in peace, I need to respect your rights, and you need to respect my rights. And sometimes, for the sake of the common good, we need to give up some of our rights to enjoy the protection of others who also must give up their rights. The language of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence has a lot of rights in it. These are our rights, okay? That is based upon the idea that we are thinking, rational people, and therefore we need to exercise our rights to bring us happiness and fulfillment. That's the basis. It has nothing to do with Christianity. I'm not saying it's bad. It seems to have worked for almost 250 years, although we struggle with it. Just to let you know, Washington was an Episcopalian, but he never took communion. Now, communion is a little bit different in the Anglican Church than it is for us, but that just wasn't something he did. Thomas Jefferson, okay, what he does is he's pretty much an agnostic. He publishes a version of the Gospels that take out the miracles of Jesus and the resurrection or anything that suggests that Jesus is divine, okay? Because deism does not accept the divinity of Jesus Christ. So we have to keep in mind, these are not bad people. They have done us a great service, but they unleash other myths. Another American myth that was very popular, the myth of manifest destiny. You learned about this in history, I think, unless they tore out that section too. But what it holds is that the United States was destined to rule the continent of North America from the Atlantic Ocean, you see Manhattan Island on the right, to the Pacific Ocean over the Rocky Mountains to the west. Now, this, it's, I guess we could say the myth has worked. That is our present geographical status, and it is what it is, and I'm not saying it should be otherwise. But what happens is that people believe that it is our destiny to rule all of this land, and us meaning primarily white settlers, primarily when this was being peddled, white Protestant settlers, because there are not that many of us in the country when this thing started in 1845. Although the Irish were starting to pour into the country and the Germans were starting to pour into the country, this doctrine of manifest destiny doesn't really apply to them. So where's it come from? Okay, let me just say first of all what it is. Manifest destiny is the expansionist belief of the 19th century, the United States, that American settlers were destined to expand westward across North America, and that this belief is both obvious and certain. The belief is rooted in American exceptionalism, romantic nationalism, and white nationalism, implying the inevitable spread of republicanism in the American way. It is one of the earliest expressions of American imperialism. The assumption is the unique moral virtue of the United States, the assertion of its mission to redeem the world by the spread of Republican government and more generally the American way of life, the faith in the nation's divinely ordained ministry to succeed in this mission. Okay, so it sets us apart as a special creation. Now, here's the deal. We can go back and forth about this, but we have to understand that we are privileged as we are because of the immense natural resources that this country has. Very few geographic places in the world have the natural resources that we do. That is the reason for our wealth and for our prosperity. Now, where does this whole idea that we're supposed to control the continent come from? Well, first of all, from our Puritan forebears. The Puritans who landed in Plymouth Rock and settled in Massachusetts believed that they were a special creation to bring God's kingdom on earth to the Western Hemisphere. They believed they were divinely ordained by God to do this, to set up a new nation founded on what they perceived to be Christian principles. So, a good question would be, who are these people and why are they there? Why did the Puritans leave England? Anybody know? Persecution. To free persecution, okay, and what else?
Economic growth.
No, there's economic growth. Yeah, money's underneath a lot of it, no question. But they disliked the Church of England, which is a Protestant church, because it was becoming too Catholic. Okay, you need to know the Puritans hated Catholics. Remember that when you eat your Thanksgiving dinner. Okay, they really they hated us. They absolutely hated us. And when the Protestant Church of England started to become more Catholic in its liturgy and in its form, thanks to King James and a few other people, they said, this isn't for us, we're out of here. Second reason on the right is President James K. Polk, okay, the elected president in 1844. And what Polk did is he campaigned on this manifest destiny myth not just because he wanted to expand our territory, but as some of you know in history, in the 1840s, we are a nation that is tearing itself apart over the spread of slavery. So what Polk said is that we can annex Texas, make it a slave state, if we annex the Oregon Territory and make that a free state. So slavery is really so that we don't blow up, we're going to blow up 20 years later over it. But what Polk is doing is saying, we got to go all the way. And when you go all the way to the West Coast, what does that mean? You displace indigenous peoples like nobody's business. Okay, so it made him wildly popular and very successful. But the manifest destiny myth was kind of peddled. Now, I'm not saying give back California and Texas. I'm not saying that. We have to play the hand we're dealt, but we have to understand that our acquisition of this land is not necessarily way up there as a noble purpose and mission. Second myth, American exceptionalism, is the belief the United States is distinctive, unique, and exemplary compared to other nations. Proponents argue that the values, political system, and historical development of the United States are unique in human history, often with the implication that it is both destined and entitled to play a distinct and positive role in the world stage. As a term in political science, American exceptionalism refers to the United States' status as a global outlier, both in good and bad ways. Critics of the concept say that the idea of American exceptionalism suggests the U.S. is better than other countries, has a superior culture, or has a unique mission to transform the planet and its inhabitants. Okay. That is what is called American exceptionalism. Now, there are some shades of this that I think are attractive. I think we can be proud of the fact that democracy is 250 years old almost. I think that we can be proud that we still have a constitution that for the most part is respected. I think we can be very grateful that the only terrible situation on our shores has been the Civil War, which tore us apart, was the bloodiest civil war of all history, but we're still here. Okay, so democracy is kind of new in the world, and we're kind of the first ones to make it last. The Greeks tried, and they didn't quite were able to do it. But since then, democracy has taken on in many societies, most of them where there is a decent level of education, because it requires votes and it requires public participation. Now, I'm saying I think that in many ways the country is exceptional, especially during the days when we did so much for the world around us. Our way of basically helping World War II to be won, the rebuilding of societies after that, the generosity of the American people, I think has been a very high mark in our favor. But there have been some other black marks on the history that we have to be honest about. Okay, first of all, are we unique? What you see here is the Trail of Tears. Okay, President Andrew Jackson decided that the indigenous peoples living in the Carolinas needed to go because we needed more room for our white settlers. So he displaces them, makes them march as far as Oklahoma, a lot of them, displaces them, violates treaties left and right. Now, does anybody know what Lebensraum is? Okay, living space. So here's the deal. Why do the Nazis invade Poland? Why do they start World War II? Basically because Hitler says the German people need more living space. Now, they fooled everybody and said, oh, the Polish army attacked us. The Polish army didn't attack anybody. Okay, but they needed an excuse to invade Poland. believe it or not, there are some leaders that make up excuses to invade and get what they want. Okay, that does happen. All right? So what happens is he justifies that by saying, the Slavic peoples are inferior, push them off their land, starve them and work them to death because we need more room for the German people to live. So when we start, piping up about that, what the Nazis are saying, time out, Americans, you excelled at it. Look at exactly what you did. You pushed Native Americans off their land so that your white settlers could have their land. That's Lebensraum, folks. Our hands are dirty. Now, here's the deal. That didn't come about because of us for the most part, because most of our forebears came into this country after all of that happened. But don't worry, we'll have our day too. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How about that? Half the country depends upon slave labor for its economy in the early part of the Republic's history. So, again, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness for some. Oh, here's my favorite. Then we start arriving in the country. What you have on the bottom of the screen, I'm sorry if you can't see it, these are bishops with their mitres being alligators' jaws. Okay, and this is the white Protestant school system that needs to defend itself against these Catholic hordes. You see the Vatican in the background. You see all these bishops as alligators about to devour these white Protestant innocent children. Okay? Anti-Catholicism remains a powerful force in America, even though a kind of latent one. Here's my favorite. The Ku Klux Klan sitting on the top of a dead pope. Okay, the tiara's over there. Over here we have Holy Bible. Holy Bible. Okay, so apparently Jesus wills that his true church be persecuted like this. Okay, now, finally, alive and robust, the myth that holds us so much. The myth of restoration, which is the belief that our salvation or success lies in returning to a glorious past that never existed. So anybody know who these people are? Those are the Israelites grumbling in the Sinai desert. Okay, so they're saying to Moses, you brought us out here to starve us to death. At least back in Egypt, we had food to eat. But now you brought us out here to perish. If only we could go back to Egypt. Time out. Anybody that read the book of Exodus knows that the Egyptians did try to starve the Israelites. Okay, they increased their workload. They also decreased the amount of mortar that could be used so that they would have to work harder and break up more stone. They meant to work them to death. Life back in Egypt was not how they imagined it to be. Okay? That is the myth of restoration, lock, stock, and barrel, right before you. Now, I was talking to the rabbi on Sunday. He says, yeah, we get it. We learn from it too. Interestingly enough, that Sunday that we were there, that congregation was having a meeting to merge with another congregation. So we were at the meeting where they were to approve the merger. So folks, it's everywhere. And I said, this is good for our kids to see. So they got to sit in the back and hear at least the introduction to what was going on, so they could see that this is how church works. Okay, this is how religious organizations work. Mergers are sometimes necessary. And he says, yeah, we had to talk about this business of Moses grumbling in the desert to some of our people who said, oh, no, if only we do this, if only we do that, then the glory days will return. The question there is, what are the glory days? Right? Okay, now, masters of cultivating the myth of restoration. I don't think any of you need to know who this guy is. I don't think any of you need to know who this guy is. Okay, there are always going to be tyrants who come along that use this myth to captivate the minds of the people, okay, and to help them not to think. So, Hitler says, he calls it the Third Reich. So a question would be, what are the First Reich and the Second Reichs? The First Reich is what's called the Holy Roman Empire, most of Germany, most of Eastern France, Austria, bits of the Czech Republic, and Switzerland. Governed mostly by German princes who were answerable to the Holy Roman Empire, who didn't really live in Rome at all. Okay? Now, the Holy Roman Empire was a confederation of states, and all they ever did is fight. Within themselves, I mean, especially when the Reformation hits, and some of them go Protestant, some go Catholic, they're always fighting with each other. So it is not a prosperous time. The Holy Roman Empire also is getting in fights with other European leaders because these people marry each other, and then there's a family feud between monarchs, and next thing you know, all hell breaks loose. So the Holy Roman Empire is not the dreamy, ideal glory day. Second Reich would be Germany under Otto von Bismarck, okay, who is the late 1800s. Bismarck believed one people, one nation, one God. And the God needed to be the God of Lutherans. So what Bismarck did to the 40% of Germans who were Catholic is he taxed them to death. He really tried to eliminate them and close their churches. Now, his timing could not be more impeccable because that drove quite a number of German Catholics across the ocean to wonderful places like New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, Cincinnati, St. Louis, all those places. Huge German immigration, huge German Catholic immigration under Bismarck. So Bismarck's Second Reich, not so great. Hitler claims the Third Reich, which is going to bring back the glory days of when Germany was this major, prosperous, glorious power like it was in the Second Reich and the First Reich, okay? This is not true. Now let's talk about Putin. Still an actor on the stage. Now, Putin's reason for invading Ukraine was basically because he seeks to try to recreate the old Soviet empire. The empire under Stalin, that Lenin started, the empire that would end up making captive nations of Eastern Europe. So the whole idea is that Russia was just wonderful when it had all of this land and all of this power. Now, let's do a little fact checking. Okay, when they invaded, one of the reasons why Putin invades Ukraine is it's the most prosperous part of the former Soviet empire. Ukraine has lots of oil, it has lots of wheat, and it can be a very prosperous country, and was when it was left alone. But in seeking to create the glory days of the Russian Empire, what gets forgotten is that when the Ukraine was part of the Soviet Empire in the 1920s and 30s, Stalin especially, he starved to death 15 million Ukrainians, took their wheat and sent it to Moscow and other parts because the Ukrainians decided we're not Russians. So when the Ukraine is invaded, can you imagine why these people are so horrified and why they have been nothing short of heroic, including their president? Now, let's also talk about the Eastern Bloc of countries. Okay, by the grace of God, places like Poland and Hungary and Slovakia and Romania and all that are no longer under Soviet control. But we've got governments in Slovakia and in Hungary right now who have, now they have been not elected, they've been narrowly elected, and there were probably political shenanigans going on in the elections. But both Fico, the president or the prime minister of Slovakia, and Viktor Orban, the president of Hungary, both believe that it's better to side with the Russians than it is with the United States. Because, you know, when we were under the protection of the Russians, life was so much better for us than it is now as we live in the economic community of Europe and have to and enjoy the protection of the United States. Now, having been in Slovakia a bit and talking to the people, let me tell you, that was no cakewalk, 1945 to 1993. Oppression left and right. Most of the resources of those countries went to Russia, and the people were basically reduced to rationing and poverty for almost 50 years. So, now, here's the deal. A person who cultivates the myth of restoration, with that comes scapegoating, okay? Blaming one group of people for all the troubles that go on in the country. In the case of Hitler, it was In the case of Stalin, it was anybody who opposed him in his opposite political party. Okay, so he poisoned, what was the guy's name? I forget his name. Navalny, yes. Now, he is the opposition, the democratic opposition to Putin, but of course, we got rid of him and accused him of all things, threw him in prison, and then poisoned him. Okay, so there's going to be a scapegoat in every person who cultivates this myth of restoration. Now, interesting that when you look at the voters who put Orban and Fico in both of those Eastern Bloc countries, the electorate is no surprise. It is largely uneducated people, lots of them somewhat employed, not because of a lack of work, but often because of a lack of skill. It is also a group of people who believe that they are victims, okay, that their jobs are being taken away by other people, especially foreigners who happen to be more qualified in some cases. So with this whole myth of restoration comes this victim mentality. Okay? Now, let's keep going. If we're going to look at this, I think what we have to ask ourselves, as this myth of restoration very much reflected today in the MAGA movement, we have to get underneath that. And we say, okay, if Make America Great Again is the way to go, when was America great? We need some answers to that question. Anybody have any suggestions as to what the answer might be? I have my own. Okay, so some say we need to go back to the glory days of the 1950s. Okay? Now, some of you were alive in the 50s. I missed it by 9 months, all right? 50s were okay. We're living under the threat of nuclear annihilation. The Cold War is going with full force. Yeah, we're expanding the nation's economy. We're also still recovering from World War II and the effects of that war, especially upon our men, who are walking around with post-traumatic stress disorder, ad infinitum. And there's all kinds of social problems that raises. The 1950s were a time when domestic violence was very high. Of course, the blacks were still sitting in the back of the bus, and the Hispanics were still south of the Rio Grande. So that could be a time we want to go back, when women knew their place, and if they didn't, they were scolded, about how that's supposed to be. We could go back to the 1920s. Let's try that. Okay, the 1920s would be another era that is looked back to as the time of glory. Okay, Ku Klux Klan membership all-time high, 1924, mostly because of us, okay? We want to keep these Catholics out of our country, at least show them that they are not first-class citizens, they are second-class citizens. 1920s, we do not have unions in place. We have lots of labor accidents with no health care, no health insurance, a lot of people dying in the coal mines and the steel mills, some of your ancestors included. Nothing to take care of those people for all the hard work they have. Okay, so that could be considered as the glory days. Same thing with the church. We've got a bunch of people saying, oh, if only we return to the church of such and such. I hear 1950s a lot. Latin Mass, everybody knew their place. Nobody had a problem with the Pope. Okay, yeah, like I said, I can't speak from experience when it comes to the 1950s, but I kind of like the church of today, gotta tell you. Okay, so as we look at this, what are you thinking? Now, if I were to say, and I wasn't around for this, and not many of you were either, but I would say the glory days of the country, and this is going to sound really weird, was the time that we spent fighting World War II. We understood what sacrifice meant. We understood what working together meant. We understood that all of us are in this together, black, white, Jew, Catholic, Protestant. Everybody fights for the good cause. We work together. Sacrifice, generosity, that kind of thing, hard work for a good cause. I think we're probably at our best. I would not want to live through those years because the stress and tension had to be horrible, and the loss of life was terrible. At the same time, when you're looking at the character of the people, it was probably best during that. So I'm going to stop now and let you ask your questions. How much time do we have? 15 minutes, okay. I mean, I could go on and on. Yes?
Father, I'd like to know what your thoughts would be when someone gets up and describes the people we're fighting against as terrible, evil people that have no good to them whatsoever. Doesn't that kind of tie to some of the concepts you mentioned?
I did forget one thing, and this is, I can't believe I forgot this. This is where our salvation lies. This is where it lies. The enduring power of the Paschal mystery, Jesus' life, his death, his resurrection. For us, the glory days are always ahead. And I'm not just talking about heaven. If we live by this example, we become better people, we become a better church, we become a better nation. Okay, so when some of these people that we're fighting are, I really don't think that a classroom full of 120 schoolgirls can be classified as evil and nasty and mean. Can anybody help me with that if I'm not seeing something? Okay, two things strike me. You demonize, part of this myth of restoration is to demonize your enemies, okay? To call them names, name calling, which is very much a childish thing, goes on all the time. So, you're a loser, and the name calling is just unacceptable, but it's going on. It's very adolescent. The second thing that goes along with that is, any of you that study psychology, you know the adolescent phenomenon of projection, okay? You take the evils within yourself that you can't take a look at because you might have to change, and you cast that on somebody else. Those are the two things that strike me. There are despicable and mean people in the world, but it can't always be those who disagree with us. That, I think, Jesus would be pretty clear on. Good question.
My name is David Rhodes, and I have the privilege of having been one of Father Jerek's predecessors at now Saint Mary Magdalene Parish. And so first thing I want to do, John, is thank you for an excellent talk.
Thank you, Dave.
It's just, I give you high marks. It's been a topic I'm currently partially blind and cannot read, so I've been listening to talks on this very subject, and you've got it right down very accurately and well articulated. Thank you. I'm thinking, if we read on to the end of the scriptures in Revelation, the book of Revelation, chapter 21, where Jesus proclaims, or John, whoever John was, scholars are not sure it was the evangelist, proclaims that at the end, the Lord will come and establish a new heavens and a new earth. The former will pass away, but it will not be destroyed. Namely, it will be renewed, rebuilt, and the call of each of us as a baptizer, as one committed to Jesus and baptized in him, is to be a part of that rebuilding of the kingdom. That was the fundamental message of Jesus, thy kingdom come. And I'm thinking that your example of the Second World War is a very good one. I never thought of that. But what a good example of people working together to rebuild a new nation, a new world order. And I remember reading where President Eisenhower said back at the end of the First World War, which he was our supreme commander for, saying that if in 50 years, Germany is a free nation and denazified and democratized, it will have been a great success. And that proved to be true. And most of us lived through it. And so we have before us a good example, as you shared with us in the Second World War, an example of what it's all about to be a Christian. Not just to die and go to heaven and have a nice life forever, which I'm looking forward to, but to be able to help rebuild the kingdom and to proclaim thy kingdom come. Thanks.
Thank you, Monsignor. Thank you. He's, yes, he is one of my predecessors and I have very big shoes to fill. I'm glad that you brought that up, though, about what Eisenhower said about Germany, because let's look at a country who, I mean, it had to do it, it had no choice, had to face their dark past, their complicity in the Holocaust, although many Germans had no idea what was going on. See, that's the whole thing with tyrants and the myth of restoration. There's all this stuff that's going on that nobody knows about, or else the spin on it creates what these days are called alternative facts. The German people do, in fact, go through denazification. They create a very strong democracy. Eventually, the Berlin Wall falls. They are a united country. They are a strong economy. And to be honest, they probably are the leaders of the free world today. The nation has, its people have learned from their past. They are guardians against this happening. The minute that one of these fascist right-wing groups start emerging, the Germans are pretty good about smashing it down, because they remember, if you don't know your history, you're going to be condemned to repeat its mistakes. So the German people will be a good example of that. This is Lent. We have to face the wrongs that our country has done, and we can't recreate what isn't right now, and we inherit the present situation, and we have this big, beautiful country with all kinds of good people. At the same time, we have to acknowledge the mistakes of our history. The fact that it wasn't necessarily most of our ancestors who enslaved people or pushed the Native Americans off their land, but we can't be joining in this chorus of what is called nativism. It's not make America great again, it's make America white again. That's really what it is. And that's what it is. And do you think there'd be all this anti-immigrant hostility if the color of their skin was pure white? Now, we are building detention camps to hold innocent people who are undocumented who have committed no crime. And this is going on very quietly until towns in New Hampshire say no thanks, towns in Kansas say no thanks. Now, I don't know what news you're watching, but if you've escaped this reality, okay, detention camps with more people in it than is necessary, what's that called? It's called a concentration camp. So we are building those for these evil people who work hard and they clean our hotel rooms and pick our produce and all kinds of things, but because they're undocumented. And while we're on that, you need to understand that when your forebears and mine came to this country before 1920, all you needed was $10 and a sponsor here. Today, the cost of legal immigration, okay, first of all, in 2016, the cost, now I know this because I brought priests over from Slovakia and Poland and Africa, the cost of immigration in 2016 was about $7,000. Do you know what the cost of legal immigration is today? Try $18,000. Somebody's making a lot of money here. Okay, questions, other questions? Yes, George.
This is one of the finest talks I've heard in a long, long time.
Thank you. Well, George is he's my other side. He's my Croatian fan club president.
It was excellent. And the other thing is, for teachers who are teaching now, Senate Bill number 1 will not permit many of these things you've talked about. And that's sad.
Yeah.
But well done, Father.
Yeah, well, see, that's it. When you start to sanitize history, Now, most of us grew up with the sanitized version of history, admittedly. Columbus came here to Christianize the Western world. That's bull, okay? Columbus wanted to make a lot of money, is really what he did. And he established the slave trade, a few other things. I'm not saying he should have never showed up, but we learned a sanitized version of history. Today's educators have a better amount of information that is before them. And for them not to be able to teach the slave trade, the Trail of Tears, the Holocaust, because it might make white kids feel bad. Well, you gotta feel bad every now and then. When you screw up, you gotta take ownership of it, right? Okay, it's just like, you can't raise your voice today at a school because it might make a child feel bad. Well, I don't know about you, but, in my Catholic school, well, I'm going to say they were wonderful teachers. They were firm. They didn't put up with garbage, and they made me feel bad sometimes, and thank God they did. Honey, keep going. Yeah. Yes, Elvira.
Since we're open politics here, how would you suggest we deal with people who are, I would say fundamental, but that's a bad word, who are Christian and who feel that anyone who is not pro-Washington right now just is wrong? When we have a Secretary of Defense/War who says that Trump was ordered by God to do this, to do all of it. How do we as Catholics who don't support what we're seeing, didn't vote for him, how do we respond to that? Because boy, you're hammered down so hard.
Okay, well, a couple things. First of all, we live in a culture of loud voices. And a good chunk of the Protestant population, not by any means all of it, its version of Christianity is very different. It focuses, it's odd because they tend to focus more on pelvic issues than on anything else. And yet, many of their leaders are serial adulterers, sexual predators that have been convicted. And can we even talk about some of these candidates? And of course, the other side is accused of being godless, but they've got the ones that were talking about Jesus in Matthew 25 like they're supposed to be. So Christianity has been hijacked in this country by these people. Okay, it's the truth that I think that our bishops know it. We're doing the best we can to put out the total gospel of Jesus, and there's even some of our own that, for reasons generally cloaked racism and greed, will buy into what they're saying. Okay, but we have to guard against Christianity being hijacked, because in the end, the standards on which we are to be judged, all you got to do is open up the Gospel of Matthew 25. It's all right there. Now, incidentally, you will not find that passage preached on. Okay, so here's a good one. I have to tell you this. Last night we did a program. What time is it? We're pretty close to done, right? Okay, last night we had a program in our parish, and it was dealing with how we deal with our ex-Catholic family and friends. Okay, we, of course, encourage graciousness and all that. But I forgot to mention this last night, so some of you that were there, I have to tell you, I was doing my research on this, and it's amazing what's out there. YouTube can be a great blessing, but it can allow every idiot under the sun to get up there and spout off stupidity ad infinitum. Well, I'm watching this YouTube about a guy who's ex-Catholic. Now he's evangelical. And he talks, this is really interesting. He's talking to ex-Catholics like himself, and he says, I sat through hundreds of masses and never heard the gospel preached until my father's funeral, which was a Catholic mass. And the priest said, Joe found the Lord Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Savior. And then he goes on to say, no talk about good works, no talk about liturgy, and it's like, okay, boy, this This is ignorance personified. All right? So, in other words, the gospel is only preached when you have Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, which means you get to make Jesus into who you want Jesus to be. You don't let him be who he is. Okay, now, and then this good works thing. Would you guys give it a rest, please? You threw out the book of James in the New Testament because James says faith is nothing without works. So thank you, Martin Luther and the rest of you, for throwing that book out. It's divinely inspired and accepted by the church for 17 centuries until you guys didn't like what it said. Now, I love Lutherans, please don't take any offense. And they've learned, okay, as we have. But to say, Catholics are all about good works, but they don't accept Jesus Christ. I don't know about you guys, but our work in the St. Vincent de Paul and Dorothy Day and everywhere else, what the Ursulines do, what the HMs do, all that, isn't that in the name of Jesus Christ? Last time I checked. Okay, so it's this old anti-Catholic works versus faith crap, and it's out there. It's real. And so, here's the deal. You're not going to win this fight. I mean, we just have to pray like mad that somehow the Holy Spirit opens the eyes of people, because the thing is, these people are fooling people. They're hoodwinking them on all kinds of issues, and they're not delivering. So yeah, it's a lot of these myths that are perpetuated. Okay, I'm at time, right, Marcy?
You're at time.
Okay, I don't get paid overtime, and that's okay.
I don't either.
All right.
Father Jerek, thank you. Oh my gosh. This was wonderful. Please, I think he deserves it. So you're going to come back next year and finish this up, right? Oh, that's right. So 2 years. Okay. Oh, he's got more. Wait.
Okay, I forgot to mention this. This is kind of sad, but it can be funny too. I did this 4 years ago, and the date was March 5th. And I was with two of my friends from Stowe, and we decided to go visit my father, who was at Humility House, and my dad died the next day. Okay, so now my mother is unable to be with us today. So I reminded her of that fact, and I says, Mother, don't give any thought to checking out. Do not, oh, no, I'm not going to check. I mean, I still have more work to do, and, she still has her nail appointment and hair appointments and all that.
Well, speaking as somebody who always has a nail and hair appointment, I understand what she's saying. But let's say a few prayers for Mrs. Jerek just in case. So thank you again, Father. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Appreciate you so much. Next month, we are not the first Thursday. We are the second Thursday. So April 9th is the second Thursday. But I hope to see everybody there for our big speaker, our national speaker we're bringing in. In the meantime, we won't see you before, so have a very happy, safe Holy Week, a wonderful, blessed Easter, and we will see you in the Easter season. God bless and safe home, everyone.